Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. And looking forward to our sixth shir. We're going to finish, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to finish the first segment of Gemara in the Gemara of Eilu Mitziyus. We're up to shir number 5. And in our logical steps, we're up to step 7, okay, which we did yesterday. I'm going to review that honestly, like in terms of skill sets and what I hope you'll walk away from these shiurim, from these classes. This is one of the biggest ones, is being able to follow the steps according to the logical sequence, to differentiate between the different steps, which we were doing thanks to Rabbi Spivak, and his system of color-coded Gemara logical components. But as I mentioned last night, this that you're looking at here, this flowchart, is another version of this, right? So we have 3 tools to help you settle in and be able to commit to memory the steps of the Gemara. Like, you know, as we've been talking all along, the actual Gemara learning, there are really good tools out there that can help you with the translation, that can help you with the nekudos, the punctuation, that can help you understand the whispering, the background information that you need to know. But ultimately, getting this part clear, really, it's almost like there's an assumption at some level that this is something that we do naturally. And I didn't do this when I was in yeshiva. I didn't even do this, you know, when I started teaching initially, not in this organized way. And, you know, you think you have all the steps in your mind, but getting to it and clarifying it, that's what we mentioned about the great Maggid Shir, the great Rebbe Rav Silber in Israel, when he was interviewed for the Siyum HaShas, when they celebrated finishing all of Gemara, he said that he became who he was because he did this on his own. So I'm just going to spend some time going over this because we're going to add a few more steps to this. If you remember, I told you yesterday, almost at the beginning of the shir, I think it was right at the beginning of class number 5, where I said that, folks, you have the skills to carry this through to the end because we've gone through this, and these scenarios, half a kav in 2 amos, 2 kavim in 8 amos, are really similar to the steps that we're going to do today. So this part, only because it's so important, just one moment. Again, only because it's so important, I'd like to go over this. Now, thank you, Mark. If you have the book and you're looking for where we're up to today, in the page number, we're going to be starting Shir Hay. Okay, Shir Hay. Now remember, we're going through the, right, in Shir Hay, according to this, just a moment, let me get, okay, so according to this way of thinking, this is Shir Hay. That was just something that we did. Again, this doesn't have to be this way. And I'm sorry, I blocked it a bit. Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, that's Chaf Aleph, page 21. Amud Aleph, side 1. And so we're going to be starting tonight from Shir Hay. Again, this was an arbitrary number that we picked, you know, that we picked. You know, Rabbi Spivak, when he was making the book, he picked that number. It doesn't have to be Shir Hay. It was just whenever we came to a point, but this is where we're starting today. I'm going to be reviewing this in the Gemara in order to, before we do Hay and Vav, the last 2 shiurim, I want to just get this straight. And by the way, you know, the overall question, that's something that I've been very, very, very passionate about, is the need to slow down. And I believe that, you know, for all good reasons, you know, for all well-intentioned, I think we're starting our kids off with Gemara too quickly. by and large, and we're not giving them enough time. I think, well, I'll put it differently. I think my recommendation would be that they should be given more time to be able to do things like this and to get the skills before going on to Gemara. In the biography of Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman was probably the closest Talmud to the Chafetz Chaim. He was the head of a yeshiva called Branovich in Europe, pre-war Europe. He was in America collecting funds for the yeshiva and was able to stay when the war got bad, like in 37, 38. He had papers and he could have stayed. And he went back, he says, my places with his students, just at Tzaddik, and had a fantastic yeshiva. I had the privilege of knowing some of the students. And in his biography, they write that they called him Rabbi Chanan Bal Pshat. Rabbi Chanan, the master of Pshat, simple translation. And the students in his Beis Medrash, it's in his biography, actually wanted to go faster. And he said, no, you got to learn the Pshat first. So this was to adults. This was, to young adults. This isn't to fifth graders. So let's just let's act on this a little bit and review this logic. Please bear with me a bit. And one of our learners here, one of our cohort asked what page we're up to, so I moved it down. But this is the one tool in the reviewing part, in the getting it straight. And by the way, Chazal say, our sages, our Chachamim said that Kol Halam, if somebody learns and doesn't review, it's similar to Zareya, someone who plants a field, the Einan Ma'asif, and doesn't gather in the crops. That's the quote. Okay, if somebody learns and doesn't review, it's like he planted, produce, and just lets it rot in the field and doesn't gather it in. So this is the gathering, folks. And I think these tools that Rabbi Spivak helped us, provided to us in this book, can really be helpful. And the beauty of this is you don't need Rabbi Spivak and you don't need this book. Once you see how it's done and how you can do this with any Gemara anywhere, I maintain that everybody would benefit from it. So here are two different ways of looking at it. We're going to do this one because it's a little bit easier. This is found after Shir Vav. And a very quick, I'm going to go over the steps quickly because we've reviewed this a few times. We started, this is Shir, if you see, folks, you see here, if and when, if you do get a hold of the book or you see, so this Shir Aleph says over here, this is Shir Beis. So it goes by the Shiurim that we picked, the lessons. So we started with a Memra, a statement, right? Our Sugi, remember Sugi is the topic, that's a big Gemara word. With a Memra, a statement that said the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that Matzah Peres Mufuzar, and if you find scattered food, you can keep it. The Gemara asks V'kama, how much? How much of it should you can you keep? What is the amount that will allow you to keep it? Okay, the kama, how much is that? And we have a tshuva. We answered that kav ba'arba amas, 1 kav and 4 amas. Now the Gemara asks a question, and what really this was, and maybe let's just go over here quickly. So right now we did this, okay? Just concentrating on this label and summarize, which is a different type of exercise, same idea, a different type of exercise. So these three, we're up to here right now, right? So we did this. The Gemara says, right, Matzah Peres Mufuzaran, we found this. The Kama, how much? And the Gemara answers, Kav Ba'arba Ames. Now we're over here. Now, 4 and 5, I'm gonna, is Mel with us? Hey, how you doing, Mel? Mel, you were right, spot on yesterday, thank you. Mel had helped me understand this, and I've done this a time or two in a different way, which is so beautiful about getting to learn with others. So now the Gemara makes an assumption that what we're talking about is something that was lost. The classical definition of an Aveda, which means a person, lost it or couldn't find it. So the Gemara says, well, what was Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? what was Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? If he was talking about that it was neatly piled up, if that's the case, if it's thank you, Mel. If it's neatly piled up, so then he shouldn't be able to keep it no matter what it is, because the guy obviously knows that it's there. And if it was scattered all over the place, meaning that it fell, no, he's not going to know. The owner is not going to know where it was. So that's why this was a pretty strong kasha. Rabbi Yitzchak was the one who said step number 3. So we're saying, what's he talking about? And the Gemara answers, no, it wasn't. And again, by the way, see these lines over here follow. That means this goes to this. It's really could be like an arrow, right? This goes to this. This goes to this. So after we finished, and let's take this for example. After we finished this one, and we said kav ba'arba amas, so the Gemara says, well, what's Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? So this question follows through, and we answer. This line means we go to here, and we say that it's talking about machnash debeidar. We made a mistake. We had a misunderstanding of what we were thinking of, and it's really talking about a case of threshing place, the place where people were threshing, and after the day's work, the guy just didn't have the energy to take those last couple of kernels. Then kav ba'arba ames, then it makes a difference. So it's not a question of did he know about it? He clearly knew about it. This was, again, it's a new term used here. It's an aveda midas. It's an aveda, lost object, which usually means that you forgot it, but it's an aveda midas. Okay, so now we're up to here. Now, step 6 and 7, the last Gemara that we learned. Now we're coming up with 2 questions, and again, I want to emphasize what we discussed yesterday, and I'll get in a minute. I'll tell you what Mel helped us with. Thanks again, Mel. So now we're up to here, right? This is where we're up to. We finished these 5, and now we're going to ask a question. Now, the question is going to be, how about if you have, right? If here it said in step number 3, it said, right, 1 kav in 4 amas. I'm gonna try. I brought the pen today, so it shouldn't be as scribbly squabbly as yesterday. Okay, so 1 kav in 4 amas is what we said is the number here. And now we're going to say, well, how about if we have different numbers? What happens if we decide to have here? How about if you have half a kav, right? Step number 6 is going to ask if you have half a kav in 2 amas, right? Same ratio. And what we're going to ask is, let's go back just quickly and let's see if we can get to it without too much effort. Let's just scroll back a bit. Let me zoom out, and let's just see where we, how this rolled out. So what we asked is, how about if you have chatzi kav in 2 amas? What's the din if you have half a kav in 2 amas? Is that the same halacha? And the real question, the thing on everything that everything would hinge upon, is what's the reason? Was it a question of, so that's actually Shir Gimel here. Okay, so what was the question here? What was it a problem that it wasn't enough value, or that it was too much bother? So this is what we talk about. Kav ba'arba amas again. So let's just very quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on the text here. I was really wanted to do the thing. By Rabbi Yirmi asks a question. Chatzi kav, a half a kav, ba'arba b'shtei amas and 2 amas. Mahu, what's the din with that? Okay, what's the din if you have half a kav in 2 amas? And then we're going to say, is the reason, is it a question of not having enough value to go back and get it? Is that the problem? Or is it rather that that it's too much of a bother? And then we'll come with the same thing. The same logic will be in Shir Daled in step, let's just go here, I'm sorry, here we go. Kabayim b'shmoina amas, this is step 7 in that logical flow chart. Kabayim, 2 kav, in 8 amas mahu, what would be the din here? And going back to this linear to this text here. So here we go, step 6. It's not that clear on the page. There's a little 6 here. Okay, so this is a 6 and this is a 7. And we're going to ask, how about if you have, again, okay, in the case, he doesn't write it there actually. Okay, so it's half a kav. This is half a kav in 2 amas. That's this. And then the Gemara says, well, a similar question would be, and tonight we're going to go to some other ones. How about if you have 2 kav in 8 amas? And then we're going to follow along with it. Here, in the logical flow chart that we had, right, in this logical flow chart, please excuse me, hope you're not getting spinning from all this movement. My apologies. I just want to get back to the flow chart that we had, the other type of flow chart. This one here, thank you. Okay, so this one here, the first one we said was half a kav in 2 amas. That was step 6. And that's right. Okay, so that was step number 6. And step number 7 is, how about if you have 2 kav in 8 amas? Now, what Mel was helping us with yesterday is, now that we're up to this point, step number 6, here's the important part. Step number 6 is not going after number 5. See, there's no line here that follows. Step number 6 goes back to, actually moves forward from here to, it moves forward to this, from this step number 3. Why? Because we said, in other words, what Mel said is that 5 clarified, 4 and 5 clarified 3, meaning that we said that 1 out of 4 is something that you left behind. So then we'll have this one. And if you notice again, I'm sorry, I blocked part of it. There's another line that goes down to 7. So both of these go back to step number 3. And it is absolutely very common that in Gemaras like this, you do have that it doesn't follow right back up, that it goes back, it doesn't go necessarily, in a hierarchy and like a railroad tracks, like one goes into the other. Very often, logic takes us that gets it to a different side. Okay, so look, I'm going to get on with today's Gemara, and I'm not going to spend as much time on the text as we did on the others because, like I said, text is something you can always get, and I'm far more interested in making sure that you have the tools to do the mechanics of the Gemara, is actually how it works. Okay. So in the last 2 shiurim, we learned that Rabbi Yirmi asked 2 questions, 2 she'elas. One was half, right? Half a kav in 2 amas and 2 kavim in 8 amas. That we did already. Now the Gemara comes with another she'ela. Now this is the 3rd she'ela in a row. You won't see that often in Gemara. Okay, so now we're going to have another she'ela. Now keep in mind, we didn't answer the previous 2. The previous 2 are just hanging right now. So the Gemara asks, kav shumshamin, a kav of sesame seeds. Okay, so here we have an illustration of what it looks like in the real world in terms of size. So kav shumshamin, a kav of sesame seeds, sesame seeds, as you see here, right? These are really tiny. And as opposed to kernels of wheat, which we were talking about before. So kav shumshamin ba'arba amas mahu. What happens if you have one of these also in 4 amas? Okay, so imagine that you have a box of right, 4 by 4. It's 4 amas, right? If this same box, it's a kav in 4 amas, and this grain was also a kav in 4 amas. So the last 2 questions, we manipulated the numbers a bit. Here, we're just talking about a fact. Now, here's the important fact. The important point for this discussion is in terms of that. So here we go. Sesame seeds are smaller. They're smaller, and they also are more valuable. Now you see the logic between the 2. Okay, so it's basically the same type of discussion, the same type of 2-sided logic. If it's a kav shumshamin in 4 amas, the Mishnah was talking about grain. kav shumshaman and 4 amas mahu, what would be the ruling in this case? And the exact same thing. Kav ba'ar ba'amas time amai, it's almost the exact words. You see that? A kav, now we're up to here now. Kav ba'ar ba'amas time amai, what was the reason that he could keep kav ba'ar ba'amas mishum deloi chashivi? Okay, because it's not valuable enough. The shumshamin, sesame seeds, which are worth more, kivin the chashivi, lai mafkilahu. And he wouldn't mind finding these tiny little kernels in 4 amas because, the risk reward is there because he's making more money. So again, the same way we asked previously, is it chashivi? Is that the thing? Is that what makes the difference? And we'll say in this case, then the finder cannot keep. Remember, we have to keep going back. We're talking about the finder. The finder can't keep it because since it's chashiv. Here we go. Perfect illustration. Again, you see kernels of wheat and tiny sesame seeds. Idilma, or perhaps that's the other side of it. No, mishum denafish terchayu. It's not the chashiv part. It's mishum nafish means lots of tircha is bother. Like I said, tircha sometimes a word you hear in the vernacular. People use it like as this mishmash of Yiddish and Aramaic and sometimes English. Okay, so is it chashivi? Is it because it's chashiv, or is it because the bother? And then again, we'll have this same question about tircha versus value, right? Which one will determine whether or not somebody can keep it, because the question is whether or not the person gave up hope on finding it. So is it mishum denafish tirchayu? If it's a bother, then this is the mother of all bothers, right? This is the right? The sesame seeds are tiny, so there's a huge amount of bother. If that's the case, the finder can keep it, right? Here's the bottom line. Don't forget, we all have to keep going to the bottom line. The finder can keep it, and again, the question is, right? Let's just the kav of sesame seeds and 4 amas. If it's monetary value, so roll up your sleeves, get on your hands and knees, and he'll collect it. So therefore, the finder may not keep it because it's going back. I'm not even going to go through the review. The review goes through basically, right, what we had. Here's the text of the Gemara. Kav shomshamin ba'ar ba'amas mahu. What would be the question? If we let's do some loose punctuation here. We're not going to do steps because we won't do steps because there's only one step here. Right? It's a very long step, and it's one big she'ela. In fact, we have a few she'elas here. I'm sorry, I wanted to get to this text. So if you find this helpful, I used to tell my students, my talmidim, who wanted to write in punctuation, I used to tell them to do it with a pencil, and like this, when they're able to do without it, they can erase it, and it's like training wheels. You can take off the training wheels after a while, but again, whatever works for you. So kav shom shom ba'ar ba'amais, this is the exact text of Shir 5, and it's step number 8, right? In our the way we're listing it here. So let's see. So kav shom shom. So I'll just pull it out just to try. Okay, kav shomshamin, a kav of sesame seeds, ba'ar ba'amas mahu. Okay, so let's put our own punctuation here. And again, like I said, you might find it helpful to do this. Feel free to. My advice is in pencil, but anything you do is fine. Kav ba'ar ba'amas time amai. This would be either like a comma or a question mark. What's the reason for kavin in 4 amas mishum delay chashivi? Because it's not chashiv. I give it a period or a colon. Okay, mishum delay chashivi, comma, semicolon. V'shumshamin and shumshamin, sesame seeds, even the chashivi, since they are chashiv, comma, loy mafgalahu. He won't be mafgarit. And we stop here. Idilma, or perhaps, maybe there's another way of looking at it, mishum denafish tirchayu. It's because there's so much bother. The kol shekain shumshamin, certainly sesame seeds, Kivan the nafish terchayu, since there's a lot of bother, tfei mafkilahu, he's even faster. Tfei means more. He will even faster be mafker and make it hefker. Okay, so here we go. And we'll go on to the next year, and then we'll finish that year. We'll do the general review again, and we'll pack this up as sugya number 1 that we know really well. Okay, so let's just go to the next year, step 9, right? Another she'ela, 4 in a row, and let's see. Now, again, let's read. Let's go through Rabbi Spivak's text again. We're going to shir Vav, 6th shir. This time I didn't block it, so it's Chaf Aleph Amad Aleph, 21, side 1, lines 34 to 38. That's counting from the top. Typically, just so you know, that when folks discuss among themselves where to find the Gemara, it would not work in this case because we want to keep the same pattern. But when people discuss among themselves, when it gets to the bottom of the page, instead of saying line 34, people will say among themselves 6 lines from the bottom. That's just a common. If your kid comes home and you're doing homework, you say, "Where did you learn?" You'll blow their minds now. you got it so well. Okay, so now that if you wind up saying, if your child comes home and says Chaf Aleph Amad Aleph, 4 from the bottom, 4 lines from the bottom, you'll know what that means, even though we use a different system here. So in this year, we're going to do the 4th and final she'ela of Rabbi Yirmiyah. This will be the opposite of the she'ela that we had in Shir Hey, which is there we discussed the case with sesame seeds are more valuable than grain, but more difficult to collect. Now, okay, so again, remember those two? Remember this, the two, right? The 2 things that we were looking on. Is it a bother or is it more valuable? Now we're going to flip it, just like we did that pattern where we had a smaller amount, like half a kav and 2 amas, and then we went to the other side, which is 2 kav and 8 amas. We're going to do basically the same logical step here. And let's go through a kav tamari, a kav of dates. Here's the illustration here, right? A kav of dates, huge things here, right? Big pieces, way bigger than grain. So kav tamari ba'arba amas. What happens if you have a kav of tamarim, of dates? Kav rimani, kav of pomegranates, ba'arba amas. Mahu, what's the din? Okay, here we go. Dates and pomegranates are larger than grain kernels. A kav has fewer pieces, but it's not very valuable, okay? So it's not very valuable. So in this case, it's going to be easier to collect because they're bigger pieces. You can just grab them. However, the value is not necessarily there, okay? So again, this is the flip, the reverse logic of the other one. And now we're going to discuss the 2 ways. I bet you could do this on your own. You know what it's going to say. Kav ba'arba amas time in mind. Is it because the loy chashivi? Is that the question? So kav tamari ba'arba amas, it's not chashiv, meaning it's not valuable. So kav tamari, kav of dates, and a kav of money, and a kav of pomegranates, ba'arba amas nami, certainly kiven the loy chashivi mafkalahu. Since it's not chashiv, the monetary value is not there. Or, like Dilma, piece of cake, right? Dilma, mishum denafish terchayu, is it not a question of value like we said here? Maybe it's a question of the nafish terchayu, the tercha, the bother is important. The kav tmari ba'arba amas, the kav rimani ba'arba amas, kav of tmarim, and rimanim and 4 amas, kivan, the loy nafish terchayu, it's not of great bother, loy mafkalu, the guy's not going to be mafkar. Okay? So here we go again. Again, this logical spread, this flow chart here. We have the two questions that we need to ask ourselves: how much bother and how much money, which is the risk reward that everybody asks themselves. So if you say the value, the finder can keep it here because there's very little value. If he were worried about bother, even a 61-year-old guy will bend down and pick it up because it's just a few lifts. Okay, so we had a kav of dates, or pomegranates of 4 amas. This is the case that we're talking about. So this was the question that the Gemara said. And now this ends the Gemara. This is a new icon that we didn't have yet. Maskana means bottom line, and the icon for this is a judge, a gavel. So we gavel the discussion to an end, and we say, what about all of these four questions? And it stands to reason that whatever you answer one, you're going to answer another. And the Gemara says, teku, new word. Teku means we don't know. It stands as a she'ela. Meaning with the Chachamim didn't have enough information. Okay, in this situation, the Chachamim didn't have enough information to be able to make a judgment. What is the similarity between the two? How does it relate between the two? Is it tircha, was it bother, or is it value? We had four different scenarios, but all of them there really isn't enough information. Just judging by what we assume happened at the time is that they didn't have a clear misara, a tradition, so to speak, that it wasn't explained that way when they initially were learning about it. And so everybody said their own thing, but we didn't have a conclusive discussion. So the Gemara concludes that we do not have an answer for these she'elos, okay? So we don't have the answer for these she'elos. This is not usual. We don't often have tekus. We can't prove the main reason is value or bother. So we leave it open, and teku is the teku literally means it stands, but we have an abbreviation. Tishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, that's how he's referred to. So we have here Tishbi, let's take a different one, here we go. Tishbi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Taf, right, that's teku. Yitaretz, right, will answer. Teretz means an answer. So Tishbi, Yitaretz will answer. That's the yud here, right? Teku. Kushyas, kasha, right? A question. Kushyas is a kuf. Vi'ibais, and questions about things we don't understand or things that we're looking for more information. So both of these teku, that's just an expression that the Gemara has, and we'll have to wait for Eliyahu Navi to come along. That's just a way of saying, once again, let's have a question. Just if it's value or bother, why do we need the four cases? Good. Okay. So okay, great. So Mel's asking. You're supposed to be answering, Mel. Come on, you're supposed to be helping me out. So if it's value or bother, why did we need the four cases? There is talk in the Mefarshim, in the commentaries, about why they're needed. There are some different opinions, and some would say that some of those cases would not be exactly the same. In other words, it turned out that we didn't have an answer for any of them. Some say that you could answer one without the other. There are differences, perhaps, in how they would be framed, and in the real world, when it comes up, it's just a question. It's just a question. It means we don't have a tradition as far as how this is done, and it's just an open-ended thing. Again, like I said, this is not a common response. But the basic idea behind it is, and the basic idea behind it is making this determination. I would propose to you, Mel, and other Talmidim, that you might not even be able to. Let me say something important. Not that I'm important, the thought. I would propose to you that this question really would be relevant in generations differently, okay? If you're going by bother, we understand that, but value, in other words, if there was a hunger at the time, let's say there were good times, right? And people, there was prosperity, so people would be less likely to go and grabble around, and look around for little things. In a time where there's hunger, the economy's bad, they had a crash, they had a difficulty, there was a corona, right? They had stuff and they couldn't go shopping, then people would go back. So what I propose Mel and others, I would think, right, sometimes it would be clear like diamonds, of course, in any area, right? But that's the point. In other words, one way of looking at this Gemara is it's giving you details. Those details were relevant then. It may not have been relevant even 3 years later if circumstance changed. What the Gemara is teaching you is how to think about it. In this case, I would propose to you, how to think about it would be relevant in any generation and any time. You would say, would the person go back to get this? Okay, and it might make a difference in which country you live. You know, we had, it was really something I'll never forget, and it was such powerful chinuch for my, I'm just, as I'm looking at this, folks, you know, this is, I just thought of this. I was a head counselor of a summer camp in the early 80s. I started working in 1982. It's our 40th anniversary next week, my wonderful wife and I. So shortly after my wedding, I went up to a summer camp in the Catskills and was the head counselor there. And the great tzaddik, Rabbi Neuberger, Rabbi Naftali Neuberger, who was the executive director in Baltimore's Ner Yisrael, there were a whole group of Iranian kids that literally walked. The Ayatollah took over in '79, and there was a big war between Iran and Iraq, and it was a whole, you know, it was a whole thing, as they say, and the kids as young as 14, 15 were made to go to the army. Some of the kids told us incredible stories. Anyway, Rabbi Neuberger, he had, you know, no skin in the game other than just being a tzaddik and a wonderful Jew that cared about people. So they had a big effort to take the kids out, to get them out, smuggle them out of Iran. Many of them walked hundreds of miles. Anyway, this just came to my mind as I was thinking about this situation. My wife ran the canteen in a summer camp. You know, there was like a little store with nash and stuff. And these Iranian kids came to camp. Rabbi Neuberger called me during the winter and he said, do you have any room I have a group of wonderful Iranian boys that have no place to be for the summer. Could you please take them in? And, you know, they couldn't be counselors or junior counselors. They couldn't communicate with the kids that well. But, you know, we had them working in the kitchen and wait staff. I took as many as we could. We wound up taking about 7, 8, 10. So I had the schus of seeing them married with families, you know, some of them. Anyway, so my wife ran the canteen and it was just, you know, she was up there, made a few bucks. These kids came in and they started taking things off the shelves. The Iranian kids, and my wife came. I got a call. Yeah, your wife, Udi wants you right away. So I ran to the canteen. She says, "Yanki, they're just taking stuff without paying." And I understood, of course, they were great kids. It was a cultural thing. So I didn't say anything. I said, "Look, we'll cover this one." I went and spoke to the kids, and I said, "Guys, you know, that's like a store." And they were so perplexed. They said, "Why would you have a store if they serve meals?" Like to them, it was just so bizarre that people would go and spend money on nash if they served 3 square meals in camp. These kids came literally with a plastic bag. You know, everybody bought trunks and boxes full of stuff. They came with a bag with all their stuff, you know? So that's a cultural thing. So Mel, that would be, you know, if you asked one of those kids, if you asked an American kid, would you go back for Kav Tamari or Shumshum, you know, whatever? If you asked a kid like that, of course they would. So again, the big idea is, I think it's in addition to having these questions, it's a way of thinking that the thinking has to survive and be relevant even after even when the circumstances inevitably change. So I think that's what the Gemara keeps saying it. Is it the bother, or is it the amount of bother we go through, or is it the other thing? Now let's just see. Let me just review again, folks. Feel free to, if you have any questions, don't be shy, or comments. Okay, so here's the Gemara. Let's do the text of the Gemara. I like doing this to give you a feel for how the text of the Gemara flows, and I'll take liberty to do a little punctuation here. Kav Tamari Ba'arba Amais, a kav of dates in Arba Ames. Kav Rimani Ba'arba Ames, a kav of pomegranates. Mahu, what's the din? Question. Now we go. Kav Ba'arba Ames Tamamai. What's the reason for a kav and 4 Ames? Mishum D'loi Chashivi. Maybe it's because it's not chashiv. So kav Tamari Ba'arba Ames, kav Rimani Ba'arba Ames. Those things that are certainly not chashiv, right? Kivan nami kivan d'loi chashivi. Since it's not chashiv, mafkalahu. He will be mafkaret. Period. Full stop. Right. So he's going to make it hefker because there's no way he's going back. Aydilma mishum denafish techayu. If you say that it's bothering some kav tamari ba'arba ames, the kav rimani ba'arba ames. Those two things. Kivan d'loi nafish techayu. It's not a big bother. Loi mafkalahu. He won't be mafkaret. Mai. What's the din? Teku. End. So we come up with a thing. We have a maskana here. Okay. So the she'ela is long here, right? Kav mahu really, well, I guess the she'ela would end here by mahu, right? It's kav tamari ba'arba amas for kav rimari ba'arba. It's a different color. All right, forget it. Teku, right? Kav ba'armas mahu. You'd say it ends there, and the maskana is teku. We come with a not, a non-conclusive answer, and we wait for Eliyahu Navi to do it. And as again, I said, but we're left with the concept. We're left with the concept. Okay, so we don't have that flow chart that we had with the other ones, but those would also go back. Steps 8 and 9 would follow 6 and 7, all of them going back to step number 3. Okay, so we were going through the Gemara. So let's use the tools that we have. We ended. Whoops, excuse me. The last thing we answered was about Machnashta de Beidari. That was 5. That was the answer. And then we go back, really. Now we're at this point. By the time we start, right, again, right? So 4 and 5 is a unit for itself. And now we have to go back and try to figure out a little more about this Kav Ba'ar. So that goes back to here. And we're going to talk about the Kav in the 4 she'elas. Okay, so the first question was, we have, again, this Gemara overall, this step number 6, the she'ela, again, here's a little 6 here, is half a Kav in 2 amas, right? Shir Daled goes another she'ela, which is 2 Kav in 8 amas, 2 Kav in 8 amas. And finally, the last 2 would be a Kav of tiny things, right, of sesame seeds, in 4 amas, right? And you'd have these tiny little things in 4 amas, but valuable ones. What would be the halacha there? We stay with the 4 amas, and in this case, we talk about large food items that are fruit that are not valuable, but much easier to pick up. The Gemara responds with a maskana. Okay, folks, any questions, folks? How do we work teku into that? What's the follow? I'm sorry. You want me to just one more? Mel, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mel. What's the question? If anybody else wants to be unmuted, just text me, and if you want to have a discussion or some questions, I'm glad to entertain them. Go ahead, Mel.
Oh, okay. You hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. So let's say in terms of the dates. So in actuality, if it happens like that, so when you have teku, so you just leave it there, I guess, and then the person can come back or not come back. I would assume that, right?
It's so interesting because okay, Gila suggested maybe they would have to announce it because it's a suffix, right? That might be a way to go. I love speaking to creative teachers and ask them how they make a situation like this real. What's a practical example of this? If you remember when we did the introduction to Gemara, way back at the beginning, we had a list of 8 barriers. One of them was relevance, right? the kids are talking about dates and figs. I mean, the average kid, if you didn't pull it down to their level, might start rolling their eyes like, okay, you can keep the dates. I mean, you can keep the dates yourself. I'll go out and have ice cream, right? So listen to this absolute brilliance. So my dear friend, Rabbi David Hertzberg, who's the dean of the middle school at Yeshiva Flatbush, we were just chatting when I started the Eilu Mitziyus book. So for a short period of time, any educators I would hang out with, I would ask him questions. Tell me, how did you make this relevant? Listen to this genius. So one of his rabbeim, one of his teachers in his school, I think it was the 7th grade or 8th grade, they were learning this Gemara, Eilu Mitziyus, and he gave them a research project. It was so brilliant. He gave them a research project that the class, I think, whatever, there are 32 football teams or whatever it was, they should research the lost and found policies of every NFL stadium. Isn't that genius? Isn't that brilliant? I'm sorry?
No, it's funny. It's nice.
It was what? I'm sorry?
No, it's funny. It's cute. It's
brilliant. It's just such as parents, this is what you do. Folks, this is where the rubber meets the road. When your kid is learning something, just imagine, one of the things that I hear from parents who, are, one reason or another, don't know Gemara, that not only do they have a barrier with their kids that they would like to help their children study for an examination and be involved in their life and help them learning and help them with their homework, not only can't they do that, but when the kid comes home and they say, what you learned today, yeah, whatever, don't bother, forget it. I mean, imagine you were doing this all day, kav shumshum and a kavrim, kav tamarim and a two amas. What are you going to tell your parent, a mother or father? What are you going to say if they're not knowledgeable in Gemara? You're going to go into the whole thing. So you could say, if a kid is literate enough, and able to condense it, he says, well, we're having this discussion about lost objects, and are people reluctant to go back for them because they're is it too much of a bother, or is the finances? But so here he had the kids, and he gave them like a week, and they researched the lost and found policies, and then they had a group discussion. So naturally, the kids, who were football fans of not the New York area. Yeshiva Flatbush is in Brooklyn, New York. So everybody picked their favorite team, But what was fascinating was they came in. Every kid got up and gave a report. Rebbe didn't even open a Gemara. He did this. Maybe I should have done it. I should have been a good Rebbe. For lesson number 1, I should have sent you 3. When we finished the introduction, I should have sent you to check out. Say tomorrow, come 2 of you give a report on that. Imagine how relevant that would have been. So and they had things that they had, like you have a general. I'm sure it's happened to you, over the years. You find something in an airport. You're getting off a plane and you see something, and you say, should I leave it there because the person might come back? Should I give it to a flight attendant? Maybe they're just going to put it in the, let's say you're a good person. You're not talking about taking it for yourself. What's the best thing to do so the person can find it? It's also challenging. And the stadiums had very different policies. It was not a uniform thing at all. So I think the response to the relevance of this issue really would depend on what's life like today, how you think whether a person would go back for something.
In this instance, it's not a question of calling it out because it's not lost. The person left it there on the threshing floor. So
right. Oh, yeah, that's correct. Right. This is it's an aveda midas. So really, it would depend. It would depend on the reality of that time.
Right.
What's valuable and what's not, and that changes with time. Right. You have a fad. I assure you that tofu, wouldn't have been a big hit until it became popular here, right? Or whatever.
Right. So Teku in this instance is stating we really cannot measure it. Is that what it's saying?
I think it's more like we don't have enough information.
Okay.
That's how I understand it. And again, that's the beauty of learning text, learning Gemara or anything that's text related, is that it's open to interpretation. In other words, the Gemara doesn't tell you exactly why it was a tekel. Was it because nobody knew? Was it because there isn't just enough? If you're just using that body of knowledge, if you're just using what the Mishnah says, if you go back to the Mishnah and you look at those things, if you're now it might be a good exercise. Let me try to guesstimate where it was. It might be a good exercise to go back a little bit further. These are, again, green pages if you do have the book, or you can look back to our previous lessons. Green pages were an introduction to the Gemara. By the way, this might be more meaningful, right? Remember we did the steps of the logical components, but we had right the Dechia, She'ela, Tshuva, Maskana, conclusion. But here we had, believe it was lesson 10. It should be in a little bit. So lesson 10 was about just different things that were lost. So lesson 9 was about this. It was actually lesson 10. So if you just look at all those items that are there, and the question of Yish came in, this would be relevant for those times when it discusses each of these things. If it just, again, we're going on, what we're trying to do is we're trying to extrapolate from this. Matzah Paris Mefuzarin here, right? Eilu Mitziyus, this is from the Mishnah. This is the actual text of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says Eilu Mitziyus Shalai, right? We reviewed this, I believe, in lesson 2. These are the Mitziyus that belong to him, the Eilu Chayev Lahachras, and these are you're responsible to announce. Eilu Mitziyus Shalai, Matzah Paris Mefuzarin. Now, this is what the Gemara does. We take this text of the Mishnah and we try to apply it to other circumstances. And we're asking how, in other words, does it give you enough information to be able to do it on your own? By the way, one of the relevancies that I used to do with my students in yeshiva was one of the things that I would do with them is I would like take a case of electricity, right? How does electricity play into halacha? There was no electricity around at the time. So what's it similar to? Okay, is it similar to a fire? Is it similar to finishing an object? Okay, so all of these things, in other words, do you have enough information from just this? Matzah Paris Mefuzarin, if it's like this, you can keep it, right? So the halacha is we say, Harehu Shalai, the person is allowed to keep it. Now, did I learn enough information of this for larger objects that aren't so valuable, smaller objects so is there, in other words, is this a template for future knowledge? And the Gemara says, we're not sure. It would seem that we don't have enough information. That's how I understand it. There could be other interpretations also. I said that's the beauty of learning text. You could understand, you could try to extrapolate what they were thinking about. If you remember, I said this is why we compare it. I used to compare it to constitutional law because it's people having great respect for text, for that wise people said, and we literally taking apart every word and every nuance of the word to try to figure out what it means for, the right to bear arms. How does that relevant to having a submachine gun? Can you have an AK-47? Is that what the framers of the Constitution intended? And I think this is also part of this experience.
Right. So, but in this instance, teiko means you have to leave it on the threshing floor, I would think, no? You have to leave it there.
You could certainly make the case for that.
What other case could you make?
I'm scrolling back in my mind. I did not look up the commentaries here, so I'm going to stay silent. I'll make a teiku. I think I remember seeing a few things on that, but I didn't research it, so we'll leave it at that. Folks, Any other questions? Okay, so let me give you all a bracha. I hope you really found this helpful. I would love if you take a moment. I would love some, honest feedback on the talks, what you found most helpful, what you would have found more helpful. Feedback to me is very important. It's not about me, it's about my students. And I would love for you to do that. I'm going to make you all, folks, I'm take a request if you would consider